Hi folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery, and today I'm going to be pulling out my husking board and showing two different ways to make flower petals. So I've done a number of crafts on this before, so this might look a little familiar to everybody, but we'll go over the basics again. I just have standard 1/8 inch quilling paper for this. I'm going to be using Elmer's in my needle nose container, just Elmer's glue all. I also have a paintbrush. I have some small scissors. They're going to come in handy. And also you might want to grab tweezers or some sort of tool. These are mostly going to be used for getting the quilling off of the husking board when I'm done with each petal. So my board is I think I'm going to pronounce this the right way, the Julia quilling board. They call it a knitting board. You'll also see it called a husking board. I'm used to calling it a husking board. Mine has the holes in the top and the lines on the bottom, and then a drawer that comes from the side with these little pegs in them. And there's two kinds of pegs. Most of them are just solid, but I have two in my set that have, find one here to pull it up, a little slotted section right down the middle. That's generally going to be the pin that you start your quilling with, and we'll go over all that as we go through making these two different kinds of flower petals. So first thing I have is my starting point. That's the peg with the slot down the middle, and I'm going to start building my shape right away. And you can use these two petals that I'm going to make in this video today as just a starting point. There is tons of variations to this board. You can do whatever you like. So what I'm going to do is start by making sort of a symmetrical arc going around my starting pin. That's a little too straight up and down for what I'm looking. I'm going to move it a little to the side. Like I said, I want this to be a symmetrical kind of arc, and you'll notice that it's got those three pegs in the center on the top. When we're done, this is going to give us sort of a rounded flower petal. Once you get used to your husking board, you can experiment and do different setups of your pins, and you'll get to know the different ways that you can use this. But for now, we're going to be making sort of a rounded petal. I have my 1/8 inch quilling paper, just a strip of that. I have some glue, I have a little paintbrush, and I also have a tool, just a needle tool, to help me get my quilling off of this board when I'm done. So to start with, I'm going to take one end of my quilling paper strip and lay that into the slot on that first peg. That's sort of the trickiest part. I don't want to say the trickiest part, but one of the trickier parts. Sometimes it just wants to bounce back out. Now the whole point of this husking board is that you're wrapping your paper around the pegs back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So we're starting with the center, and then we're going to go back down to our starting point, back up to a peg on one side, back down to the starting point, up to a peg on the other side, back down to the starting point. And on that first center peg on this particular design, we are wrapping it around, coming back down, and we're going to glue that little tiny bit that we left out to the rest of the strip. We want to keep it nice and tight. So I'm going to keep that one finger there to make sure the strip doesn't move anywhere. Pull the other end, get it all lined up, give it a little pinch for a second to get that glue going. I even like to turn my starting point just to make sure that there is no loosiness in the strip. And that should be about that. And then, like I said, we're going to each peg on either side. So I brought it back up, wrapped it around, and then trying to not knock out any pins, bring it back down to the bottom. And then I'm going to go back up to the pin on the other side and back down to the bottom. If you want to add some glue at every turn at the bottom, you can. I usually do every other for this particular design, but doing every pass, especially as you start out, might not be a bad idea. It's going to keep everything nice and together for you. You need the tiniest bit of glue there. So now I've moved on to the other one on that side, and then the same on the other side, and a little bit of glue. And I will mention there are some quillers who don't like to keep their pegs in their board as they're doing this. They add them one at a time. So if you're doing that, you would do what I just did there. You would pull your strip up, put the pin where you want it, and wrap it back down. That's kind of tricky until you really get the hang of where the pins are going to be and how it's going to affect your final design. Completely up to you though. I just went back on the other side on my last pin, a little dab of glue, and then bring the rest of my strip past the center starting point again. I'm going to hold that in place. I'm not going to get rid of any of the paper on the rest of the strip for now. After that dries for a minute, I can start taking it off of my husking board. If you want to take out all your pins and just have your quilling come right off the board, you're welcome to. Sometimes that can get a little annoying, especially if you're making an entire flower where you would need maybe 6, 8, or 10 of these petals. You might not want to take every pin out and have to put them back in every time. If that's the case, you're just going to slide something underneath, like a needle tool or a toothpick, or you can use your tweezers and pull it from the top. You just want to make sure that everything stays together and you're being very careful. Now remember, I did not glue every point on this, so that's why mine came up for a little bit there, but I'm going to hold it in one hand, pull all my loops together, and then use the rest of that tail to wrap 2 times around my whole petal here. Notice I'm not pinching anything. I don't want to lose those loops. I'm just wrapping very gently. And now I'm just going to cut instead of tearing here because I don't want to pull too hard and warp my flower petal. And I just cut off the excess, add a little dot of glue, and wrap whatever's left around and get that to stay in place. Again, without pinching anything. Use my needle tool here to burnish that a little bit. I didn't put any glue on the tops of the loops as I was wrapping it. It's all going to stay together if you're very careful. That is just a rounded flower petal made on a husking board. Very simple. There's a million variations to this. This is just very straightforward. Putting them all together and you can have a little kind of daisy flower like this. Now we're going to move on to the second version of our petal on our husking board, and that is going to be more of a kind of pointy style petal. The first one was rounded. This one is going to be a little bit more pointy at the end. You see the difference right away. We have more of kind of a V shape with a center line down the middle. I'm also changing up a little bit this time. I'm going to use 3 different colors on this version. So the center is going to be yellow, and then I'm going to add a little bit of orange and then a little bit of pink as well. So we're starting off the same way. There is my center, and then we're going to go up and back, up and back, up and back towards the center, and then we'll start doing either side. So I have my strip in the center. Like I said, I'm starting with the yellow. And I have my little extra bit on the side that I'm going to glue. Just fold that up so it's in the right direction. And this time I added a little bit of glue before. This is such a small loop. I don't want to get my fingers caught up in there. So try to get that caught in there. There you go. This, just like the other one, if you wanted to add 1 pin at a time as you're wrapping, you can absolutely do that. Another reason why I had it all set up is so that if you wanted to make this exact shape, you could take a screenshot or make some notes or set up your husking board while you pause the video and you would see exactly where the pins were supposed to be. But like I said, as you get comfortable, if you want to add one pin at a time, it's definitely easier. You don't have to worry about knocking a pin out as you're wrapping around a different pin. Sometimes the paper can get a little caught up between them. Completely up to you. That was my wraparound of my second pin. So a little bit more glue here. And then I have one more pin for the yellow. And it's going to be that last one in this row. All the way up there. Wrap it around. Come back down. And I need to get rid of the excess yellow strip here. You could tear if you want to. That could warp what you've already done. So for this circumstance, not a lot of times I cut my paper in quilling. This time it gets a little bit easier to cut. And then I have some tweezers here. I'm just pulling this really tight again. You can use your hands if you want to, but sometimes my hands get in the way a little bit. So that's why I have my tweezers back out. And from there, we're going to add on our next color, which is going to be an orange. There you go. This time I am going to tear. That's going to give me a nice bonding place. At the bottom here, quilling paper that's torn does grip a little bit better and faster than quilling paper that's cut. So I get that right at the bottom, facing the direction where I'm going to start wrapping next. Get that really stuck on there. There we go. And at this point, I'm just going to go back and forth. So on one peg on one side, and glue back around to that one. And just because there's a lot more going on this particular petal, I am going to be using a little bit more glue than I did the first time because I don't want it to fall apart with all these different colors. There's our last one of the orange. So just like with the yellow, I'm going to give a little snip right at the bottom and a little bit of glue. Get that pulled over real nice and tight. And after that sets, I'm going to move on to our last color, which is going to be that pink. Again, just tearing off the end to give it a nice smooth place to stick. And we're going to wrap it around just like we did with the orange, those last two pegs on either side. There's one. And a little bit of glue on the bottom. And there's your second. Just like with the first petal, we're going to add a little bit of glue on the bottom. And we're going to leave the rest of the pink tail because we're going to wrap around again to make it a nice finished petal. So at this point, everything is dry. It only takes a couple seconds. And just like I mentioned before, if you want to take each of your pins out, you can. That would look just something like this. These pins are very easy to lose also. They do roll away pretty easily. This little drawer is very handy to have around. I would make sure they get back in there. There we go. And then just with some tweezers and pulling out my center pin. So that's just showing the two different ways that you can get your quilling off of your husking board. And now I talked about not pinching earlier. This particular petal, I am going to give a bit of a pinch to the top because I want it to be nice and pointy as opposed to the rounded petal of last time. And there you go. Wrap around for once and wrap around twice for a nice solid border. I felt a little bit more comfortable tearing that one. It just felt a little bit more solid in my hand. But it's up to you. You can cut that part. That's okay. Just pull this, make sure it's nice and tight. Oops. And get that down to seal. And you can change this up if you want to. You could pinch it even more, but you'd lose your nice loops that you just spent all that time making. And here's an example of a flower that you could make with the pointier type petal. So it really does look different having them a little bit pointier. And there, like I said, there's a million variations you can do on a husking board. I have a number of other videos using both the pins and also some ways to use those lines at the bottom of the husking board. So I'll definitely link those down below in the description box so you can see them if you have any other questions about it. As always, I will link the rest of my supplies in the description box as well, so you can find everything you need to make these flowers. And you'll also find a link for my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can check out some quilling extras that I've been adding recently. You also want to make sure that you leave any questions you have in the comment section, and I'll get back to them as soon as I can. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and that way you'll be around for my next video. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.